philosophically. Okay? So then the library bill that passed, House Bill 710, was much less difficult, it was more watered down, but it still had a penalty if any person deemed a book harmful to minors. And it defined harmful to minors as anything that could arouse sexuality. Well, there's some sick people out there who get aroused on some sick stuff. I thought about our libraries. We have National Geographics in there.
Sure.
That also included media like movies. Well, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Titanic. Okay, it's PG-13. There was so many things in that bill that were just, it just wasn't good legislation, and I didn't support it. Not because I want kids to have porn or because I want children's sections to have awful, dirty books, but because when I asked my mother-in-law, they had a list of all these bad books. I said, "Do you have any of these books in your library?" She says, "No, and we never would." And I asked the librarian of Blackfoot, Lisa, I believe, and I said, "Yeah, too many names." And I said,
No, it's Lisa.
Okay, good, Lisa, yeah. I said, "Do you have any of these books?" And she goes, "No, and we never would." And so then I reached out through a connection and said to then Representative Young, have you talked to any of the librarians in our community about these books? No, she had not. So this was another example of a bill that was just trying to create a headline. And so I didn't support it for those reasons. I didn't support it because it's bad legislation. But do you know what I did do, Brian?
What?
We had a bill that came this session on that exact library bill, 710. Because guess what? It's in court right now. Right? We're being sued. All of us are being sued because of that bill. Your tax dollars are going towards defending that bill. And so we came and we said, look, we can fix this bill if we add some new features, we strengthen it. One of them was adding a section on adolescence, because you have to look at things in their context. A National Geographic magazine that might have some bare-chested women from Africa in it is different than adult entertainment.
Sure.
Okay? And so the updated bill gave some additional side rails and added some new definitions, and I voted for it.
So a few things there. If you were listening like I was, you might have heard two opposite extremes. First, we said anything could qualify as harmful to minors, and so there would be all kinds of content that's harmful to minors in the library. And then the other thing that we heard is there is no material that's harmful to minors in the library, and I think it's really tough to have it both ways. But the other thing that I hear there is some incorrect information about the definition of harmful to minors. And I will say that I did speak with my opponent during the last election cycle, because this bill apparently was the reason, according to him in at least one of the forums that we were in, that he decided to run. And I think it's interesting that I corrected this same information 2 years ago, and it's still being shared incorrectly. But I'm going to reiterate again now the same thing that we talked about then, which is that the definition of harmful to minors, which comes straight out of our criminal statute and has been on the books for 50 years, has a lot of case law around it, is very specific. This is not an ambiguous definition. It requires a number of things. So if we go to Title 18, which is our criminal statute, and then we go to 1514, and we go down to subsection 6, there is the definition, harmful to minors. And I'm just going to share it with you in its full glory, so you know everything that it must be in order to qualify under this definition. Any description or representation in whatever form of nudity, sexual conduct, sexual excitement, or sadomasochistic abuse when it. So it has to be those things, but then here's some additional requirements. It appeals to the prurient interest of minors as judged by the average person, not just the random sick person, but as judged by the average person, applying contemporary community standards. And this is something that a court would look at, and a court would ask this decision. The police officer doesn't have to make this decision. The person in the public doesn't make this decision. It's a judge that would decide, is this appealing to the prurient interest of minors as judged by the contemporary community standards? And so in law, when there's an and, it means it has to check all the boxes. It depicts or describes representations or descriptions of nudity, sexual conduct, sexual excitement, or sadomasochistic abuse, which are patently offensive to the prevailing standards in the adult community with respect to what is suitable material for minors. And, here's another and includes, but is not limited to, patently offensive representations or descriptions of intimate sex acts, normal or perverted, actual or simulated, or masturbation, excretory functions, or lewd exhibition of the genitals or genital area. Nothing herein contained is intended to include or proscribe any matter which, when considered as a whole and in context in which it is used, possesses serious literary, artistic, political, and scientific value for minors. So that end part means that the courts have ruled that something like the Statue of David that has literary or artistic merit could not qualify under this definition. So it has to appeal to the prurient interest of minors, it has to be patently offensive to the prevailing standards in the community, and it has to show specific body parts and acts. So this is a long, detailed definition. This is not the National Geographic. This is not your average everyday thing, but I can also tell you this. When I served in the legislature, I reviewed many of these materials, as did my colleagues. And those materials were so obscene that when there was an attempt to share them as evidence in a committee and then on the floor of the House, the Speaker of the House prohibited us from passing them out, even when they were in folders. And we had taken measures to ensure that the pages, who are minors, would not be handling them. So there really is some stuff that meets this definition and that's highly offensive. And research was done, and what they found is that there are these materials in libraries across the state. I don't believe that there were these materials in the Shepley Library, and I've said that. But I do know that some of the libraries in this area did have some of the materials that I believe would meet this definition. So here we've gone from one extreme to another, from there is no problem to every book would qualify, and now all of a sudden we're representing that, well, this year's bill was good.
Another example of what you're talking about? Okay, so I'm holding two different bills here. All right, so these are what we call statements of purpose.
RSs.
RS. Well, these are the SOPs after the bill's been introduced, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's part, yeah. So one of them is House Bill 824, and the other is House Bill 827 from 2022. It's the bill for the funding for the Commission for Libraries. Okay. So if you look at the first one, House Bill 824, and you can go down and you can see the federal dollars, the total dollars that's being spent. It's an increase of 30.2% to the budget. That seems like a lot. But when you dig in and look at it, you'll find that there's a line item of $3.5 million of federal funding only. $3.5 million. And you say, well, what's that for? And you come over and it says telehealth grants. And then you go and you actually read the bill and you'll find that it's about technology for libraries. And in that technology for libraries included internet content filtering for pornography on computers that would keep kids, give the libraries money to be able to keep kids off the computers looking at things they shouldn't look at.
Okay.
It didn't pass. My opponent voted against it. Then the next day, JFAC brought back House Bill 827, the same bill, the same Commission for Libraries, okay? And you look down, you'll see the total is a negative 10.5%. We're cutting the budget now, negative 10.5%. How great is that? And you say, well, wait, what changed? And you go through, do you know what changed? $3.5 million. Gone. the telehealth funding and the content filter funding to keep the libraries in compliance with the children, I forget what it's called, the children something law, okay, was gone. And my opponent voted for that one.
Wow. So this is a great example of how having context helps. It's also a great example of the importance of reading the bill and not just the SOP. So I can share with you the backstory of why there was a no vote to begin with, and then a removal of that 3.5 million, and then a yes vote. This was shortly after the first library bill had failed, and the Commission on Libraries was fighting it. They were not coming alongside and helping the legislature to troubleshoot how we could solve this problem of these materials harmful to minors. So we decided that as a legislature in these situations, one of our best levers is the budget. Everybody has to have a budget, and there's a reason that the People's House controls that budget, because it's our job to make sure that the bureaucracies and the agencies address the concerns of the people. And so we informed them that until they were ready to come alongside and support in that issue, we would not be passing the budget. And then we killed the budget. And this was a united effort by Republicans, more than just a majority of Republicans, because we had enough Republicans to kill the budget. After the budget had gone down, people came to the table. The intention, of course, was not to kill the budget and leave it dead, but simply to get people ready to talk about what the solution was. So I happened to be in those meetings, and at the table, along with Representative Gayan de Mordaunt, we worked with the Idaho Commission on Libraries, and they were willing to agree that there was a problem and that they were responsible to help address the problem. And they worked with us on a resolution that identified their responsibility and the problem, and also laid out a solution, which was a working group in the interim. And we laid out exactly who was going to be on that working group, and gave the working group the responsibility to reach a solution during the interim. So once that groundwork was laid and the resolution passed on the floor with the Commission on Libraries supporting it, then I went ahead after that, and when the budget came back from JFAC, I voted yes. Now, the budget did come back from JFAC with $3.5 million federal ARPA dollars removed from the budget. But those dollars, while they were for telehealth and they could have been used for filtering, were not the only thing keeping filtering happening. Filtering is still legally required. And the reason that it would have been good for my opponent to read the bill carefully is that there was actually a Section 4 in both the budget that failed still after the resolution, which I voted yes for, and the next budget, which finally passed. And that Section 4 specifically reiterated that even though that funding was not in the bill, that the libraries were responsible to continue to follow the law and filter the content, and that the companies that they contracted with were responsible to verify that their content was filtered. So we did not remove the funding because we didn't care about filtering. No, we killed the budget because we insisted on the Library Commission coming to the table to help protect kids. Then when they'd done that, then we passed the budget with a requirement that they do exactly that. So this is not what my opponent is misconstruing it to be at all. He doesn't understand the history of what happened there. What this is actually getting the job done of protecting kids. And that's what we ought to be doing.